I'm Debbie House, Executive Director of Content for Retail Touchpoints. I want to welcome you all to this Retail Reset presentation called Mitigating Future Risk, Why It's Time to Do Business in the Cloud. Today, I'm joined by two industry experts, Peter Sheldon, who is from Adobe. He's Senior Director of Commerce Strategy at Adobe. And from Vertex, Mark Sieczkowski, who's Cloud Product Manager. Hello and welcome, Mark and Peter, for joining us today.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
Hi, Debbie.
Hi. All right. I'm just going to go through some quick bios about Peter and Mark, so you know who they are before we get started. So first, Peter is a well-known industry expert in e-commerce and omnichannel technology, having previously held the role of Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. He spent 5 years leading Forrester's global research on digital commerce technologies, helping to challenge the thinking and lead change for e-commerce executives undertaking major digital transformation and commerce technology programs. Today, he leads commerce strategy for Adobe. And Mark Sieczkowski has over 15 years of IT and product management experience. Mark joined Vertex in 2013 as Senior Product Manager, Indirect Tax O Series. Prior to joining Vertex, Mark served as Vice President Solution Delivery for Devon IT, a thin client computing company. He was responsible for developing strategic relationships with Lenovo and Acer Corporation. Mark's an accomplished product manager with diverse business experience developing products in the software, semiconductor, and hardware environments. He's held various management positions with ST Microelectronics and Siemens Medical Solutions. To Vertex, he brings his expertise in product management, strategic planning, competitive strategies, direct sales, international sales, negotiating skills, and technical services management. That's a lot. Okay, Mark holds a Bachelor of Science in Marketing from University of Phoenix. So once again, welcome to both of our speakers today. All right, I'm going to kick off this conversation talking about, now we're really going to be talking about the cloud, but how, the cloud related to e-commerce, and specifically as we're moving into a post-COVID-19 world. So the first question is going to be for Peter. Peter, so the impact of this pandemic, I think, has been obvious to everyone, but perhaps affected a lot of businesses or industries in different ways. Can you talk a little bit about who you think's been the hardest hit and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think, there's no doubt that, the travel, tourism, restaurants, hospitality have been incredibly hard hit across all of their channels. So there's just been, almost a slowdown to a complete shutdown, stop in their operations and their businesses. And that's true for, their physical, outlets, but it's also, true in terms of new bookings, through digital, et cetera. Now, if we look sort of, beyond, kind of those areas that have had sort of, the highest exposure and the highest hit, and we look sort of into slightly, broader, category of businesses, without a doubt, every business has been hit. And when we think about Adobe's clients and the type of, customers that we support with Magento Commerce, the vast majority of our customers have actually seen a significant uptick in their digital business. So from an e-commerce perspective, we've seen a lot of our customers now, telling us that they're seeing, Black Friday every second day. They've seen, exponential growth in their online traffic, online orders, online demand. But it's not all been necessarily positive. There's certainly been huge challenges for them on sort of the supply chain, fulfillment, operations. Yes, demand has shifted from sort of traditional physical channels into the digital channel, but actually operationalizing that, getting all those orders packed in the warehouse, managing inventory visibility to their customers, and getting those orders to customers, all of the carriers and the fulfillment networks are completely, overwhelmed at this time. And so although this has definitely been, for the most part, the majority of our customers, e-commerce has been a huge, or the only bright spot in this crisis. Many of our customers, though, are still generally, in a negative revenue position. So e-commerce has taken off a lot of the strain that they've seen from having shuttered stores and a huge drop in their sort of physical brick and mortar, retail, and it's all shifted to online. But online, although has been huge in terms of being able to do that, hasn't necessarily offered a complete replacement for that loss of revenue in the stores. And then certainly there's some categories, I think, like luxury, that have where online hasn't necessarily seen sort of that uptick. So certainly fashion apparel, luxury are definitely in an overall decline. But I think for a lot of our customers, as they sort of look past COVID, e-commerce it's really just sort of reinforcing that they should have been, made greater investments in their e-commerce channel, and I think it will now drive further investment in their digital and e-commerce channel as they sort of come out of the crisis.
So yeah, a lot of very dramatic changes, some positive and some more challenging.
Exactly.
So yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us, and everyone can see some of the categories listed and their impact on this infographic that we're showing on the screen. So I want to turn to Mark right now, and Mark, I want to find out from you, when you've been interacting with customers, with solution partners, with peers, what is your sense about the mindset of the corporate world right now? Are people more worried than optimistic? Are they skeptical about the future? Just fill us in a little bit on your perspective.
Yeah, I really think, first, thanks, Deborah. I think really when it comes down to it, our customers, there's, I want to say skepticism, there's concern, there's a lot of questions. So when we talk about it, you're moving to the cloud and you're talking about e-commerce and customers conducting business. In the sales tax arena, customers, there's a lot of questions about what are the states going to do from a sales tax perspective? How are we going to file and remit? What are the processes that states are putting in place to kind of work through those issues? So I think, with all the questions of what happens once we get back, and how do we enable those activities when we get back, and how do the states react? How do the organizations react from a sales tax perspective? When you're leveraging an e-commerce system or you're leveraging a cloud solution, I'm still managing my business, although I'm managing it remotely. I'm able to do my sales tax configuration as part of that process and work through it. So ultimately, I think that there's just a deep concern. We've been following government recommendations for roughly 9 weeks. There's concern about how do we move business forward once we get back. But also I think there's optimism that one of the things that I think businesses have addressed in a lot of industries is the ability to work remotely and online, leveraging cloud technologies.
All right, terrific. Thank you for that overview. So that introduction kind of brings us to our specific topic today, which is about working in the cloud. Mark and Peter, both of your companies are leaders in your respective specialties. You have tremendous depth in the e-commerce space and leveraging cloud technologies. So I want to find out, and I'll ask Peter to respond here. So in the wake of COVID-19, what about doing business in the cloud, specifically e-commerce, do you see as being a mitigating strategy for this and future incidents of similar nature?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we've been talking to a lot of our customers, and I think one of the, the big questions that's really coming up is what is the new normal? So we hear a lot of talk about the new normal, and this sort of forced pivot that, as consumers as well as business buyers have had, where, the only way to continue to, to buy from brands and CPG firms and businesses, has been from e-commerce. It's just now a sort of permanent shift. Are consumers and buyers going to go go back to using contact centers, face-to-face interactions with with sales reps and going to physical stores? And the answer is of course, but I don't think the pendulum is going to swing all the way back to the way to where it was. So I think we're going to see a shift back to obviously those other channels opening up for business again in the coming days, weeks, and months. But there is a permanent shift that's undergone here. So I think we can look at it from a couple of categories. Definitely, for the work from home, phenomenon that is going to be a permanent resonance. Companies like Adobe, we've got 22,000 employees, every single one of us, from our CEO down, as with the vast majority of companies, all working from home. And are all those employees who used to be in an office going to be back in an office on a permanent basis? Probably not. I think this will have transformational shift on HR work from home policies, and there'll be a lot more flexibility for employees to work either permanently at home or to have more flexibility to be at home when it's right for them. And so obviously cloud technologies have fully enabled that. The fact that a major company like Adobe can go and literally pivot overnight and put 22,000 people working from home. That's enabled, by the fact that we're a cloud first, cloud enabled company, and it's the same for our clients. Our customers, all in the same boat. So I think there's definitely an aspect of the permanent shift there, and then for my industry, from sort of an e-commerce focus, again, the sort of forced shift to online buying is going to be, we're going to see a lot of behavioral changes, a lot of, especially in B2B, corporate buyers, people who are used to, buying from a salesperson or going to a branch of a distributor to get, products that they might use in the construction trade, etc. They've been forced over the last, couple of months to adopt e-com, and maybe that wasn't sort of something that they'd embraced or used before, but now very rapidly they're finding out, hey, actually, this is an incredibly great way of buying, and it's more efficient and it's easier, and it's saves me a bunch of time because I don't have to get in my truck and go to a branch and so forth. So there's definitely going to be a permanent shift where this is there's a step function increase in terms of channel shift away from stores, branches, contact centers, etc. to digital. And I think for the most part, companies that were well prepared for that have seen huge positive outcomes from this, and for those that perhaps were less prepared for it, they're doubling down. They're now realizing that investing in cloud-based commerce technologies is really, for a lot of our clients now, the number one investment priority, and they know they have to do it very quickly now.
Yeah, so definitely considerable benefits. We know that the cloud has been around for a long time, but there are still a lot of companies that haven't really considered it for the majority of their business processes. So, we definitely, especially right now, with the social distancing that's going on, and businesses trying to figure out, who's going to be an essential worker, they definitely should be thinking about cloud as a very important strategy. So Mark, from your perspective, can you fill us in, what are some of the other benefits of cloud-based businesses that make it a risk mitigating plan that's worth pursuing?
Yeah, I think really it becomes, for me, a question about where do you want your IT organization to focus, right? So if you look at all the organizations and you look at Adobe, take Vertex as an example, you're looking at a very large volume of employees all now working from home. And your IT staff is probably focused on ensuring that those systems are up and running in order to support the staff to do their daily jobs, video conferencing, email, chat, whatever the IT infrastructure is needed to support those folks who are working from home, managing the e-commerce platform from a cloud perspective. When you look at it from a tax perspective, freeing up those resources by leveraging a cloud solution enables them to focus on the supporting areas around their IT staff versus worrying about managing their sales tax rates or daily updates or how do I get new data loaded into my system? That can all be managed remotely. And then it's a focus on business continuity. How do I continue to keep my business moving forward if something were to happen? If I'm managing my infrastructure locally and something goes out, what's my plan? What's my recovery plan? How do I manage it? Where the resources have to be applied in order to focus on supporting the business to get it back up and running? If you're leveraging a cloud solution, that's probably managed for you. An organization's taking into account as a service a solution around disaster recovery to ensure that you can have business continuity with some type of response time for how quickly I'll be up and how much data I'll lose as part of that transaction. So ultimately, it becomes a solution around business continuity and how do I continue to move my business forward if something were to occur in my on-premise environment.
Okay, thank you. Yep, that's definitely a compelling argument, especially under the circumstances. So Peter, looking through the lens of the pandemic and certainly hindsight being 2020, it's obvious there are a lot of benefits of doing business in the cloud. But setting aside the trauma that we've all been dealing with and the business has been dealing with, what are some of the general benefits or advantages of cloud adoption that some companies just might have been unaware of?
I think, through the e-commerce lens, one of the biggest advantages of cloud-based infrastructure is just the sort of the ability to elastically scale without any sort of pre-planning, forwarding, and to make sure that in what is basically an unplanned event such as COVID that is for our merchants is causing massive spikes of traffic, unprecedented traffic that are creating those Black Friday events multiple times a week, and in many cases traffic that's far exceeding Black Friday. So to put this in context, for a lot of e-commerce merchants, they plan for Black Friday for 6+ months of the year. As soon as they're planning from this from sort of May onwards, and infrastructure planning is a big part of it. And for this to have happened, then be in a position where they're almost in a sort of permanent Black Friday scenario during COVID. Only the cloud can do that in terms of giving you that elastic compute capacity and being able to make sure that in an unforewarned, unprecedented extra load of traffic, that your e-commerce site is still up and running, is highly performant, is transactional and operating. The customers are getting a great experience and not frustrated with long load pages. It's really key, especially in this time when it's the only place you can buy. There is no fallback. There's no plan B. So you have to be offering a really, first-class online digital experience, and that means you got to throw a lot of cloud infrastructure and compute at it, and that's where the cloud, really comes into its own. That you can do that in a completely on-demand, manner without, any worry of, having to sort of, pre-order, new bare metal boxes or, plan for those events. It's that is a true differentiation of the cloud.
And Mark, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, and I was going to say, I'm not really sure that, there's a lot of businesses out there right now that are, probably looking and interested at saving money. And when you move to a cloud solution, you do get to reduce some of the cost of maintaining the IT infrastructure and those systems. Managing data updates and patches is all managed by the provider when you're looking at a cloud solution with from a software perspective. So you're not purchasing the equipment up front. So you're reducing that time to get the equipment in the building and then to have it just managed by another organization. And you get to focus your staff, right? One of the biggest returns on investment I think there is from leveraging a cloud provider is taking your staff and allowing them to focus on how to grow the business. How am I going to grow my business? What am I going to do to respond to the pandemic? How am I going to manage that or to some other event similar to something like COVID-19? What happens and how do I get to manage that? And how do I get to return and let my resources focus on the activities to manage my business versus managing IT infrastructure and providing the support around that? So there's a bit of cost savings that you can say from a cloud infrastructure standpoint, since you're not buying all the hardware. in order to and the IT staff to maintain it. But there's a better piece that says I also get the ROI of allowing my employees to focus on how do I grow my business? How can I manage my business better without focusing on the IT infrastructure to support it?
Yeah, and I think just to add to Mark's comments, I mean, also, I think one of the big advantages that you get from hosting your applications in the cloud is all the sort of monitoring and guesswork is managed for you. So that 24/7 network operations center, understanding any issues and also again going back to sort of scalability, but the fact that there's automated automation around scalability, that you don't have to have armies of teams ready on hand, monitoring that infrastructure. That generally cloud applications are sort of self-healing and self-scaling, and it allows to Mark's point, allows your staff and your operations people to be focused on more sort of strategic initiatives.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. I just want to point out, just in case anyone didn't take a look at the screen, the new infographic that I had posted, just talking about the current level of concern that companies are feeling as a result of COVID-19. And with that, I'm going to move back to our speaker slide. So just as far as cloud technologies, it just sounds like they provide a level of peace of mind, which is really helpful for companies right now. So Mark, can you talk just a little bit about, what do you think has been the biggest factor in the early adoption of these technologies? Is it a perception that, a new thing is risky and gimmicky? What do you think is kind of holding people back?
Well, yeah, I think, cloud's been around for a while, so I don't want to say it's new. It's been around for a long time. I think there's some myths out there. I think there's some perceptions about security and who has access to my data and where do they get it from, and it's easily hacked. So I think there's some issues around perception around cloud technologies, what it can do, what it can't do, what types of security measures are in place. We talk about latency. It's going to take a long time for transactions to complete. So I think there's all kinds of different myths out there right now around what cloud computing is. I think part of that, or maybe not a myth, but part of the challenge isn't that it's risky, it's that I have to give up some control, right? So if I'm in an organization where I've had total control of my environments and my systems and a ton of flexibility in configuration and doing what I need to do in my environments, and I'm going to move to the cloud, I'm giving up some of that control. I think there's some concern about giving that up. And what will I lose? And I think really when we think about it, cloud technologies have excelled and grown so much that we've really dealt with a lot of those issues to really become systems that are much more reliable and sustainable and secure.
All right, thank you. Yeah, it definitely sounds like companies that haven't looked into adopting cloud technologies need to seriously think about it. So Peter, can you talk a little bit about when companies are starting to think about cloud technologies? How do they weigh the pros and cons and make the smartest choices for the future of their businesses?
Yeah, I think the very first question a business owner should ask themselves is, what's the greater risk, manageable precautions in a cloud environment, or the risk of reliance upon legacy systems, on-premise servers, and, equally unreliable backups, lack of a disaster recovery strategy, general antiquation of practices, et cetera, that, stifle or cripple your potential for growth. So, I think, those firms that are still, and we see, it's perhaps more prevalent in Europe. There's certain jurisdictions in Europe where there is a lot more focus on data security and data sovereignty. I think in some ways more than the data security, where there's perhaps still a bias towards on-premise deployments, and so I think one of the sort of the real pros and cons to sort of think about is I think it really comes down to, in some ways, business opportunity. Yes, you can have your own, cloud operations team. Yes, you can, you can manage your own, on-premise, infrastructure and so forth. But what are you losing out on? Because, in so many ways that has been commoditized by AWS and Azure and the cloud, infrastructure providers. And so, I think there's a very, it's very proven that, moving to the cloud really in today's market is not a security risk and has many, many benefits. So, what are you missing out on? Can you redeploy, those in-house, resources and investments into, more sort of, a more strategic focus on your business?
Mark, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Peter there. I think right now all businesses really, when you take a look at what's happened with COVID-19, are really starting to review their digital strategy, right? They're evaluating, do we need e-commerce? And it's quickly becoming, do I need e-commerce to, some local farmers have already built e-commerce platforms in order to facilitate sale of their produce, right? So they can deliver contact-free produce by people ordering online, pulling up and dropping in the car. So I think organizations are already starting to do that evaluation of their digital strategy to leverage e-commerce, looking at their ERPs to figure out how can I manage that from a cloud organization, but from a cloud perspective. Same with marketing, customer relationship management. We're all familiar with the different tools, and I think it runs in the same from a sales tax perspective, where you have the ability to leverage that from a cloud technology perspective and have somebody else manage that infrastructure, have somebody else manage those data updates for you, again, to really help your business continuity to stay in place, and really to define the essentialness of your employees to focus on your in-house systems and your employees versus other technology. So, I know that Vertex and Adobe always welcome open dialogue around a conversation around future technologies. So I think if people have questions or concerns around it, they should definitely look to those types of organizations to gain support.
All right, terrific. Thank you so much. So I think we're going to turn our conversation over to a Q&A from the audience right now. And I want to remind our audience, if you do have questions for Peter or Mark, please feel free to type them in. We have time for a few questions now, and if we're not able to get to your question, our speakers will be able to reach back out to you afterwards. So our first question is for Peter. Peter, can you elaborate on some of the differences between on-premise security and that of cloud-based systems?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea that cloud security is unsafe is probably the biggest myth that refuses to die. For non-IT people or those seeing off-premise security solutions for the first time, it's hard to believe that data stored beyond their physical reach can actually be safe. In reality, storing data on-premise and on your own servers isn't the best way to protect it. The greatest form of defense comes in the form of strong governance, strict access rights, diligent data monitoring, all of which can be deployed with cloud storage. And also consider that storing data on-premises makes it vulnerable to potential natural disasters. If backups are created at an offsite location, the workaround approach is the same idea used for cloud security. So I mean, I think if you think about most of the cloud infrastructure providers, they have multiple availability zones. So applications and the data and the security is deployed across three distinct premises that are on different power grids, on different floodplain zones. So they really are thinking about all eventualities. How to operate during a pandemic. You can guarantee that was absolutely part of the the operating manual for AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, etc. They thought about these things.
Thank you, Peter. I have another question for Mark. Mark, what security provisions help protect cloud storage providers from attack?
I think a primary benefit of the cloud computing is the constant service patching and security monitoring. The cloud providers do primarily, when we talk about security monitoring, you're talking about 24/7 monitoring. It proves to be a deterrent for data breaches and information hacking. To further that context, cloud security, the firewalls, both internal and external networks, it creates additional layers of security. The external network is safe from malware that users might download unintentionally. And similarly, the firewall also prevents the internal network from being compromised in the event of external threats.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Peter, can you answer this question? Is it true that anyone can access data in the cloud?
That's an interesting question. No, I think you have to sort of put this in context. I think there's often a lot of fear about what we might call sort of, shared infrastructure, shared environments. So obviously, there's been a huge, pivotal shift in the industry towards supporting sort of, containerized, architectures. And so, yes, you've got, within an application or suite of applications, you've got, many, many different customers all, ultimately sharing the same compute in the same infrastructure, but doing so in a containerized environment. And so I think there's a lot of questions about, well, are those environments secure? Could data or sensitive PII or customer data somehow be accessible by someone that shouldn't be accessing it? And the simple answer is no. There's a huge amount of focus that goes into the security. Even when you're running a sort of shared infrastructure, containerized type architecture, the founding principles of all of that technology is based on security. If you don't have security, you don't have a product, you don't have a service. And so, I really don't have any, concerns there. I think, there's a huge amount of, testing and governance that goes in to make sure that even when we're in a shared compute environment, that, each, customer instance is completely self-contained and secured. So, again, I think that's perhaps a slightly misunderstood myth.
All right, good. Thanks for explaining that. So, Mark, this one's for you. You touched earlier upon the issue of data sovereignty, with storage being sometimes overseas. If this is an issue for my company, how do you resolve it?
That's a great question, because data sovereignty is a challenge for organizations who fear they'll lose control of their data. It's also there's also rules and regulations in different markets that talk about data sovereignty. So we talk about geographical storage locations if it's justifiable for your organization, particularly for business dealing with confidential records or personal identifiable information, due to regulatory and compliance standards. So it might be illegal for businesses to transfer data overseas based on those rules and regulations from a compliance standpoint. So, however, that doesn't mean that data can't be controlled in the cloud. If you're building your own data center, might not be an option. You can always turn to local cloud providers who will be able to provide storage and help you with that. And running a global organization, if you're working with global service providers that operate data centers in different countries, those service providers will not only understand the regulations in the law, but they'll be transparent about where your data lives and how it travels and how it's protected.
All right, great, terrific. I'm going to, I think we have time for one more question, and then I just want to remind everyone, please, if you have questions, type them in, and our speakers will be able to respond to you after the session. So this last one, Peter, is for you. Would you say that cloud security is better than on-premise security?
I think it's important to note that all businesses have different requirements, and there's no absolutes when it comes to cloud security. But when compared with on-site storage solutions, cloud computing and security really does emerge the winner. Working with a top-level cloud computing service provider can certainly provide your businesses the reliability and security that they need in the global marketplace. Apart from advanced security features and infrastructure, a reputable provider can also offer transparency needed to take the business to the next level. So I think we've seen it from all the providers that there's a very robust suite of security tools and process and governance that again is really the foundation of what you need to provide if you're going to be in business as a cloud provider.
All right, fantastic. Once again, I want to thank both Mark and Peter for sharing your insights on cloud security, especially during such a challenging time that we're in right now. And so I want to remind our audience, you have another minute or two to send in questions. There are some resources that you can download as well. Other than that, please, you can register for more sessions now through May 20th. Our next one is called Store Operations Lessons Learned from an Essential Retailer, How Big Lots Addressed COVID-19 Challenges, to be held on May 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So thanks again to Mark and Peter, and thanks to our audience. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.